Good evening, I'm Farhana Sheikh and you're tuning in to AWANI tonight. No special parliamentary seating to pass anti-party hopping bill. Instead, it will be tabled on July 18th. And the supply of chickens in Malaysia is expected to stabilize from June. That's coming up. The proposed anti-party hopping bill will be tabled when Parliament begins its scheduled meeting this July 18th. De facto Law Minister Dato Sri Dr. Wan Junaidi Tuanku Jaafar said the Prime Minister has decided that there was no need to hold a special Parliament seating as it would cost the government up to 1 million ringgit. Earlier, the Parliamentary Special Select Committee (PSSC) had proposed for a special parliamentary seating to table and debate the highly anticipated anti-party hopping bill. Wan Junaidi explained the government will have to bear an estimated cost of 1.07 million ringgit, not including operational costs, if the special seating is held for both the Dewan Rakyat and Dewan Negara. Besides this, he noted that several MPs will be overseas if the special parliament sitting is held in the first week of July as proposed by the PSSC. The Dewan Rakyat is scheduled to meet from July 18 till August 4th. Wan Junaidi assured ample time would be given to debate and pass the proposed bill. If passed, the anti-hopping law could be enforced as early as September. A total of 39 MPs had jumped parties since the 2018 elections, resulting in political instability with Malaysia changing prime ministers 3 times within the same term. Ampang MP Zuraida Kamaruddin has been named President-Designate of Parti Bangsa Malaysia (PBM) after officially being accepted as a member of the newly formed party. PBM current President Larry Seng said the decision was unanimously made among the party's Political Bureau and Supreme Council.
Zuraida, who is also Plantations and Commodities Minister, had left Bersatu on May 26th. She has yet to meet Prime Minister Datuk Sri Ismail Sabri Yaakob to discuss her future in the cabinet. However, she said she was open to completing her term as minister and would continue to carry out her duties.
Passport applications and renewals have shot up 65% recently, according to Immigration Director General Dato Khairul Zaimi Daud. This has caused congestions at immigration offices, especially in the Klang Valley. Khairul said one of the factors behind the congestion was people swamping the offices at the same time, particularly in the morning. He also assured that the supply of passports is sufficient. He said Immigration Department had more than 1.2 million passports and more will be added if supplies run out. The operating hours at 6 immigration offices were extended to 10 p.m. while those in another 6 were extended to 6 p.m. from May 11th to accommodate the sudden increase. Meanwhile, the Health Ministry expects cases of hand, foot and mouth disease (HFMD) to decline in the next 2 to 3 weeks. Health Minister Zuraida Kamaruddin said the spread of the disease is usually seasonal and that a higher level of children's immunity will lead to fewer cases. His ministry theorizes that the sharp increase in HFMD cases this year compared to pre-pandemic 2019 may be caused by children spending less time outside during the pandemic. This would result in them not being exposed to the virus, thus having low immunity towards it. Malaysia has experienced a sharp increase in the number of HFMD cases this year, following the reopening of economic sectors and schools. On Tuesday, Health Director General Tan Sri Dr. Nur Hisham Abdullah said a total of 82,846 HFMD cases have been reported as of last week. Khairi also clarified that the short supply of medicines at certain pharmacies and private health facilities was not due to panic buying. Instead, it is caused by the high demand for certain medications following the earlier spread of the Omicron variant of COVID-19 and the rising HFMD cases. He assured that the medication for common illnesses such as flu, fever and headaches may be in short supply now, but have not run out of stock. The supply of chickens in Malaysia is expected to stabilize from June. Minister of Agriculture and Food Industries, Dato Sri Dr. Ronald Kiandi, said in the meantime, the government will begin stockpiling chicken as part of measures to secure domestic supplies and control rising food prices.
Other measures include simplifying import procedures for chicken feed and setting up a priority lane to accelerate imports until chicken supply stabilizes. Meanwhile, Ronald said the government would also review electricity tariffs to reduce the operating costs for suppliers, grant a special exemption to allow chicken farms to recruit foreign workers, as well as study mechanisms to lower crude palm oil costs for feed mill operators. On June 1st, Malaysia imposed a ban on the export of up to 3.6 million chickens per month in a bid to address the supply shortage issue.
The combined wealth of Malaysia's 50 richest was down 10% from a year ago to $80.5 billion. According to Forbes Asia, overall 30 tycoons saw their wealth decline, including Kwok Group's founder Robert Kwok, whose fortune fell 10% to $11 billion. Nevertheless, the 98-year-old tycoon remained at number one, a position he has held for over 2 decades.
There was no change in the top 3 ranks. With $10.1 billion, Kwek Ling Chan, chairman of Hong Leong Company, was the biggest gainer in dollar terms and cemented his position as Malaysia's second richest person. Press Metals' Kun Po Kiong and his siblings remain in the third position with $6.2 billion. The country's rubber glove makers, that were among last year's biggest winners, saw their fortunes fall as demand for personal protective gear decreases, knocking down shares of companies like Top Glove, Harta Lega, Supermax, Kosan Rubber Industries, and Riverstone Holdings. Collectively, the wealth of this group of 5 shrank more than $5.7 billion. The only newcomer onto the list this year is Loy Tuan Ee, following the listing of Farm Fresh, propelling him and his siblings onto Malaysia's 50 richest list for the first time, with a combined fortune of $380 million. The minimum net worth to make the list was $255 million, down from $315 million last year.
With restrictions on economic and social life now lifted, could the worsening traffic congestion have been mitigated? Tonight on Consider This, we ask experts if our traffic woes are an insurmountable problem. We'll go for a quick break. Stay with us.
COVID-19 memperlihatkan kepada kita betapa pantasnya adaptasi teknologi di kalangan PKS kita. Niaga AWANI dan Unified Business akan menyelami perjalanan kebangkitan semula PKS kita melalui segmen Jiwa SME setiap Selasa dan Khamis untuk inspirasi anda.
Transformasikan perniagaan dengan Unified Business, rakan digital pilihan anda. Hubungi kami sekarang dan jimat sehingga 50%. Jom Unified Business.
Walau dalam kesibukan seharian, pasti ada ruang untuk membuat kebaikan. Ekatkan hati untuk saling tolong-menolong dan bertolak ansur sesama kita. Dengan memudahkan urusan orang lain, kita memberi sinar buat hari mereka. Kerana hidup ini sebenarnya mudah. Di Easy Korban, kami memudahkan urusan korban dan akikah anda. Easy Korban, mudah dan dipercayai.
Welcome back. Technological developments have given rise to new means of cyber operations in armed conflicts. For the International Committee of the Red Cross, this raises serious humanitarian, ethical and legal challenges. Its Regional Director for Asia and the Pacific, Kristen Chipola, discusses the unprecedented issues they pose to average civilians.
We see growing use of cyber operations in military operations. So you have those kind of situations that we are observing, that not only on the ground having military operations such as shellings on critical infrastructures, hospitals, for example, and coupled with that, we have cyber military operations. So both on the same infrastructures. And that could really have massive humanitarian consequences on not only the patients who are in these hospitals, but on the civilian population around. So here again, the use of cyber operation with this possibility to infiltrate systems and to destroy data at the end with those various targets. Can be industries, can be transport, can be telecommunication systems, can be water and sanitation systems, but also hospitals that are really of a concern and that must be used according to and in compliance with the international humanitarian law.
According to Chipola, any humanitarian consequences will depend on the way new weapons are used in practice.
The new technologies of warfare are really of a concern for the International Committee of the Red Cross, as such that the new technologies of warfare must be used or must be capable to be used in compliance with the international humanitarian law regulations. And that's the key, the minimum requirement that we are asking when states, non-states, armed groups do use new technologies of warfare.
On to international news. Shanghai authorities will lock down parts of the city in the southwest on Saturday morning to conduct mass COVID-19 testing. Its first major movement restriction since the city emerged from a 2-month lockdown recently. The move is raising concerns that the city's reopening is backsliding as officials fear a rebound in cases.
The Minhang district, with a population of over 2.5 million, will conduct nucleic acid tests for all residents. But the government said restrictions will be lifted once testing is completed. Even so, residents face the risk of being confined to their homes for another 2 weeks if cases were detected, given China's zero-COVID policy. Shanghai reported 4 new symptomatic COVID cases yesterday, all in zones already under quarantine. None of the new cases were in Minhang district. Elsewhere in Shanghai, officials appear to be escalating curbs and placing apartment blocks back under lockdown over the slightest hint of infection risk.
Thailand legalized trade of marijuana, including growing and using it for consumption in food and beverages. Smoking pot, though, is still unlawful. The country removed hemp and marijuana from its banned narcotics list, being the first Southeast Asian nation to do so. Starting today, individuals can grow cannabis plants at home for health purposes. However, smoking cannabis recreationally remains unlawful and can be fined and jailed up to 3 months. Commercial cultivation without a license is not allowed either. The government is hoping that developing a local cannabis trade will boost agriculture and tourism. Diners will also be able to order cannabis-infused dishes and drinks at restaurants. Clinics across the country can also more freely offer cannabis as a treatment. Cannabis growers must register on a government app, Pluk Ganja, with the app having nearly 100,000 sign-ups so far. Meanwhile, the government said it plans to release some 4,000 prisoners convicted of cannabis-related offences. A wider draft law on cannabis control is currently being considered in Thai Parliament. More than 1,000 monkeypox cases were reported to the World Health Organization outside the countries in Africa where it more commonly spreads. WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, however, assured the public that further spread is still preventable. 29 countries have reported cases in the current outbreak, which began in May. None have reported deaths. Tedros also said there had been more than 1,400 suspected cases of monkeypox this year in Africa and 66 deaths. He urged those who have been infected to isolate themselves at home and avoid close contact with others to avoid further spread of the virus. As for the COVID-19 pandemic, despite cases and deaths continuing to be on a downward trend, Tedros highlighted how testing and widespread vaccination are still lacking. He said 68 countries have still not achieved 40% coverage, even though vaccine supply is now sufficient. That's all on AWANI tonight. I'm Fahana Sheh. We'll see you again.
good evening. I'm Melissa Idris.
And I'm Sharad Kuttan.
Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Data by the TomTom Traffic Index has shown that traffic congestion in Kuala Lumpur and during peak hours in the morning and in evenings have consistently been worse than pre-pandemic levels in 2019. Now, a study done by Boston Consulting Group has found that people living in KL spend about 53 minutes stuck in traffic jams every day. But congestion doesn't only waste time, it also increases pollution and the risk of traffic accidents. Tonight, we take a closer look at some of the policy measures that might work to reduce traffic congestion in KL and the Greater Klang Valley area. Joining us now is Dr. Rosli Khan. He's a transport economist. Dr. Rosli, I'm sure that this is a conversation you've had many times before, but in recent days, many have tried to explain this phenomenon of bad traffic as workers returning to the office after working from home for a couple of years, and now all economic sectors are back in full swing. Can I ask you whether there are other issues at play here, perhaps larger structural issues or problems? What do you think is going on?
All right, Melissa, hi. Thank you for having me for your show. Very happy to be here. Yeah, we have had 2 years of very mild traffic on the road because of the COVID-19. And I think with the lifting of lockdown, now everybody is eager to get back to work. And instead of working at home, they want to be back in the office environment. Thus, we face this issue about the road congestion, which is not abnormal, but it used to be normal before the pandemic. But to make it worse, I think this time around, people are sort of a bit scared to use public transport. So if you look at the figures, the number of car sales, the small car, by the way, has increased quite a bit. And people choose to drive their own cars to work because they feel safer. They are alone in the car. They are not mixed with any other passengers in the public transport. But for those who can't afford to take their cars to the city center, then they have no choice but to use public transport. I think that's what we are faced at the moment.
So, Rosli, okay, so you're saying it's literally a question of the increase in the car population. Could this have been anticipated by the authorities? Could we have somehow mitigated the worst aspects of increasing car population, a decrease in the use of public transport, and all those other issues that play into traffic congestion? Could this have been anticipated and, as it were, mitigated by policies, incentives and disincentives and such?
Yeah, there was a plan by the federal government to upgrade commuter services, KTMB commuter services, which I think they started way back in 2015. As Melissa mentioned just now, there is a marked decline in the number of commuter passengers from 2015 onwards. After the time when they introduced the double tracking improvement, which meant that there was a reduction in the number of trains serving the 4 major corridors, which are Klang to KL, Rawang to KL, Batu Cave to KL, and Seremban to KL. So what used to be quite a major transfer of passengers from these 4 origins and the stations in between, from 134,000 in 2015, and it has now reduced to only about less than 30,000 per day, which is a big reduction in the numbers. But sad to say that that project, after the first phase was done, that was between Rawang to KL, the other two legs between Seremban to KL and Klang to KL never materialized. So the service level for that KTMB commuter services are still at the old level, and it doesn't give confidence to the public transport users to go back to KTMB commuter. So that's what we are